Hello everyone, Bible believers around the world. Before we get started in today's lesson, I would just like to apologize for any background noise that you may hear because I'm making this video outside and I actually live right next door to a hospital. So it's very likely that you will be hearing emergency vehicles thundering by the apartment on the road below. Now, getting into this lesson, this is actually something that I covered a little bit in a past video. And it's the doctrine that says white people are born with tails. Now, I came across this particular comment on a video recently, and this is not the first time I saw this comment. I saw this comment, I would say a few months before. I saw it again, this week, and I thought I would finally address it. So, this user right here commented on a video which I already talked about, the whole no human is born with tails, and that is doctrine of devils of evolution trying to disprove the Most High Yah and his creation of mankind. They're trying to give credit to monkey evolution. That's what they're trying to do. But now I'm going to be covering it from a biblical side. I'm also going to be getting deeper more into the so-called scientific side of things. Now this guy says right here, in reference to the tail video, that's that Esau coming out, that serpent seed, that man of the field, that fallen angel, that Caucasus Mountain coming out. Yet they got the audacity to call us monkeys. He spelled foreign wrong, name one black man. He forgot or woman in history that was born with a tail, name one. This has been going on for centuries, but the media never reports it. Now, let's get started. So for starters, he's using the serpent seed doctrine. Now, if I remember correctly, the serpent seed doctrine actually originated in British Islamism. It was a white supremacy doctrine originally meant to dehumanize black people, ironically, and the One West campers have picked it up and have now reshaped it to fit their ideologies, just like they've done with most of the other camp doctrines, just like the 12 Tribes chart. The 12 Tribes chart was originally a British Islamism doctrine to say that all the Israelites are white, and they simply just took the chart and changed the countries on the chart. So, this is nothing new for the One Westers. The serpent seed doctrine is the doctrine that Satan in the garden had intercourse with Eve, and they had a child, which was Cain, and Cain is the forefather of all of the so-called black races of people on earth today, making them not human and inferior. Now, this is easily debunked by the scriptures, because the scripture makes it clear that Cain was the child of Eve and Adam. Adam and Eve had two sons, which was Cain and Abel. And Satan did not have intercourse with Eve and have a child. Now, one thing I'd actually like to mention is that the Watchers had intercourse with the daughters of men, and their punishment was a lot worse and a lot quicker than what Satan went through, because the Watchers, for having intercourse with human women, were locked up instantly, and they are still locked up today, and the only time they will be unlocked up is when they're ready to be judged and sent to the lake of fire. But we know that Satan didn't do this, because if he did, he would have received the same judgment, because the Most High is not a respecter of persons. And why are we to assume that if Satan took part in fallen angel activity, that for some reason he wouldn't be judged accordingly, just like all of the other fallen angels were judged? And we can, know this to be true, because Satan was still able to walk on the earth in the book of Job, and he also went into the wilderness with Christ in the New Testament to try and tempt him. If Satan had done that, he would have been chained up and would not be able to go anywhere. So that's debunked. Scripture debunks it, and also common sense on how the Most High punished the fallen angels. We know that to be true. Now, talking about the man of the field part, the man of the field was not referring to Esau being a snake and being a reptilian. It was actually referring to him being a cunning hunter, because when you read in context, I put the scripture up on the screen, it says that he was a cunning hunter, a man of the field. Where do you go hunting? You go out hunting in the field. That's where all the elephants, and the wild boar and the deer are. So, just like typical One West, taking scripture out of context to support false doctrine. Now, the fallen angel part, we already know that to be a lie. I already did a whole series about the Caucasians not a product of the fallen seed. Go check that out. Already covered that. And also, Esau was not a fallen angel. He was the son of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham the Hebrew. And I just find this super crazy. How could you even try and make this doctrine work? Because the scripture is clear who Esau's parents are. So how could Esau be the son of Eve and Satan when it's clear that he was the son of Isaac. You know, so you'd have to postpone you'd have to make Esau's birth about 1,000 years early for this doctrine to work, for him to be during the same time period as Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel was before the flood. Esau was born after the flood, so Esau don't even fit into the pre-flood world. So that's already knocked out right there. Now, getting into some other facts about the Caucasus Mountains. For starters, Esau's not even white. Esau's not the white man, so, you know, Edomites were swarthy with afros. So the whole idea that you're saying that white people have tails and that they're Esau and that they're fallen angel, like, you know, Edomites are swarthy people with afros, so that's already a problem. You know, that one West Camp doctrine is false. And also, I'd like to point out that Esau and the Edomites did not have tails. The scripture is very vocal about weird Nephilim traits, like Goliath having 6 fingers, 6 toes, and 2 rows of teeth, and being like 19 feet tall. And none of that stuff is said about the Edomites. I'm pretty sure that the Edomites, if they had tails, that would have been documented. Alright. Now I guess we'll get into the scientific part of it. But before we move on to the scientific part, you know, for one thing, we already discovered that Esau's not even white. He ain't the white man. But talking about white people having tails and being, you know, demon seed or whatever, like the serpent seed doctrine says, we know that doesn't make any sense, because when Paul was in the New Testament talking to people, one of the people he was talking to were the Galatians, who were the same people as the Goths, you know, one of the most barbarian tribes of Europe, you know, the barbarian, you know, the white folks, you know. And not only that, but when Paul was talking about how far the salvation of Yah goes, you know, how far Yah's love goes, he mentioned the Scythians as being eligible for salvation. The Scythians were another one of those barbarian white tribes, you know. So I think Paul, you know, the servant of the Most High Yah, would know who can be saved and who can't be. And I don't think, you know, he wouldn't mention the barbarians if they weren't human. And a lot of these guys also mention the Neanderthal DNA, and they try and make that something. We've already proven that the Neanderthal monkey doctrine is a hoax. The Neanderthals were people of color. You know, they were not Nephilim beasts. We already covered that in the Caucasian is not a product of the fallen seed. And there was actually a brother who made a video who was doing the teaching that white people mixed with Neanderthals who were Nephilim, he says, and that's how they became white. But here's a bombshell about that. Indians have Neanderthal DNA as well, and they're 19 shades darker than me, and I'm an American black man. So if Neanderthal DNA is Nephilim makes people white, why are the Indians more swarthy than the American black man, although they have Neanderthal DNA? So it makes no sense. Let's move on. Doing a little bit of a throwback to some things I covered in the Caucasian is not a product of the Fallen Seed series. It's very hypocritical for these One West campers to be using Neanderthal DNA as a way to try and paint white people as salvationless monkeys. Because the truth is that the Neanderthals were not monkeys. They were the melanated ancestors of white people. When you look at the super old depictions of the Neanderthals, they were depicted as black people with straight hair and blue eyes. But then they changed that narrative in the later years, like 1980s, 1990s, and they started making them look like Fred Flintstone characters. I wish I had the source, but I also remember reading in an old book, I think it was in the 1930s, where they referred to the Neanderthals as being Negro. So whenever you call a white person monkey because of Neanderthal DNA, you're really actually being insultive, if that's even a word, my bad, to everybody who has melanated skin, because you're telling them that because they had ancestors who had brown skin at one point, that makes them monkey. So that's actually very hypocritical.
This quote, none of them, and none of the reports in the literature that I know of, are actual tails. A tail has vertebrae, a continuation of the coccyx, has developed muscles, nerves, and other soft tissues, etc. None have the structure of a tail, even in rudimentary form, and none of the ones I've operated on were attached to the coccyx in the way that a tail.
Now, one last thing I'd like to add is that the whole doctrine that white people are born with tails actually comes from Elijah Muhammad of the Nation of Islam, a black supremacist group from the 1930s. That's why I put his face on the thumbnail. Now, the One West campers are quoting Elijah Muhammad, which is the same guy who taught and believed that Adam and Eve weren't the first humans like the scripture says. Elijah Muhammad also taught that Adam and Eve not only were not the first humans, but they were simply just the first white people, and that black people come from the moon. Elijah Muhammad also taught that Jacob was not the founder of the 12 tribes of Israel, but instead was an Anunnaki space Nephilim type who lived on the moon, and during a fit of rage, he blew up the moon, and one of the fragments from the broken moon fell down and became what we call Earth today. Elijah Muhammad also believed and taught that Jacob studied in the city of Mecca. So the One West campers are using doctrine from a man who taught that Jacob did not establish the 12 tribes of Israel like the Torah says, that Jacob was not human, that Jacob was actually an Anunnaki, and that Jacob studied at Mecca. That's just blasphemy to the scriptures. But that's the thing about the One West camps. Anything to dehumanize Gentiles and create false doctrine they would use, no matter who says it and how this person has been debunked and how much this person digs into the occult and goes against the scriptures. If they fit the narrative, they use them.